What is going on, Planar here, back with another Honkai style guide, and today I'm here with the full in-game guide for Cipher. So in this video, I'm going to be taking you over everything you do need to know, including an overview on her kit and eidolons. Then I'll be taking you over her best Lightcone options, followed by that will be best relic sets and Planar ornaments to run. Then will be Mainstat and Substat recommendations for the actual relics. And at the very end, I will be giving some team building / team option for ideas for you to run Cipher on. Everything in this video is time coded, so if you just need a specific part, you can very much skip to it as needed. And that's all I wanted to say before I get into the video. If you guys found this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new and haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell for future videos like this, along with all the 5-star content and guides, and let's get straight into the video. So Cipher is a quantum character following the path of nihility. Her basic attack is the generic, dealing quantum damage equal to a certain amount of her attack to a designated enemy. Her skill has a 120% base chance to weaken a designated enemy and the adjacent targets that are hit, and that weakened state will decrease the damage dealt by those hit enemies by 10%, and at the same time Cipher will gain a 30% increase to her attack for 2 turns. At the same time, it deals quantum damage equal to 200% of Cipher's attack to the main enemy you did attack, and to the adjacent targets it will be quantum damage equal to 100% of Cipher's attack instead. Her ultimate first will deal quantum damage equal to 120% of Cipher's attack to that designated enemy you do choose. After that, it deals true damage equal to 25% of the recorded talent value to that designated enemy, quantum damage equal to 40% of Cipher's attack to that designated enemy as well and its adjacent targets, and then true damage equal to 75% of the current talent's recorded value, and is also distributed to all skill targets. For her talent, the enemy on the field that does have the highest max HP will be put into the patron state, and if you do use your skill and ultimate, the primary target you do choose to attack will also become patron, and patron will only actually be active on that latest target. Anytime that enemy with patron is attacked by anyone on your team, Cipher can launch a follow-up attack that deals quantum damage equal to 150% of her attack and can be triggered 1 time per Cipher's turn, and will reset at the start of her turn. Cipher also records 12% of the non-true damage that your allies do deal to that enemy that has the patron state, but overflow damage will not be recorded, and the recorded value is cleared after you do use the ultimate. Her technique gives her a blessing for 15 seconds, and during that time of that blessing, enemies will not be able to detect Cipher herself, and she also gains a 50% increase to movement speed in the overworld. And anytime you do approach an enemy in the overworld or simulated / divergent universe, you have a chance of immediately obtaining a random consumable, and you can obtain up to 50 consumables on each Earth day. And if you do have that blessing up when you do enter battle, you deal quantum damage equal to 100% of Cipher's attack to all enemies, and will also increase the recorded damage Cipher does obtain from that instance by 200%. For Cipher's bonus traces, her A2 will increase her crit rate and recorded value percent by an amount equal to her speed. If you have 140 speed or higher, you will gain a 25% increase to crit rate with a recorded value increased to 50%. And if you have 170 speed or higher, that crit rate will now be 50% and the recorded value increase will now be 100%. For A4, Cipher will record 8% of non-true damage allied targets dealt to the enemy targets aside from patron, and overflow damage is still not recorded. And her A6, the crit damage dealt by her follow-up attack increases by 100%, and anytime Cipher is on the battlefield, meaning if she is just active on the field, she will make every enemy on the field take 40% more damage. For Cipher's eidolons, for E1, Cipher's recorded damage is 150% of the original recorded damage value, and anytime she does use a follow-up attack caused by her talent, she gains a 80% increase to her attack for 2 turns. Her E2 has a 120% base chance of making enemies that she does hit receive 30% more damage for 2 turns. Her E4 will give her access to additional quantum damage equal to 50% of Cipher's attack when anyone on your team does attack that enemy that does have the patron state. And her E6 increases her follow-up attack's damage by 350%, and she now records an additional 16% of non-overflow damage dealt by this attack, and if you do reset the record upon using her ultimate, you get 20% of that reset recorded value back. Taking a look at the best Lightcone options for Cipher, overall her best one is going to be none other than her signature Lightcone, which does increase the wearer's attack by 18%. After the wearer uses an attack, you have a 120% base chance to inflict bamboozled on every enemy target that is hit. While under that bamboozled state, enemies have a 16% defense shred for 2 turns, and if wearer does have 170 speed or higher, which is the same as you would want as her base kit requires that too, you also will have the theft state on enemy target, and while under the theft state, enemy targets have their defense decreased by 8% for 2 turns, When bamboozled or theft is repeatedly inflicted, only the most recent inflict can take effect. This makes her significantly easier to build as it is increasing the wearer's speed, so you very much only need a few more rolls into speed to get to 170 plus speed. On top of that, does provide defense shred in the actual form of the Lightcone effect with 16% here and 8% here, which is going to further amplify the damage she can do as a debuffer, and also increase her role overall as a debuffer, as you know, defense shred is going to increase her damage. It's also going to increase her team's damage, which is why overall it is the best for both the sub DPS part focusing on damage and also the more debuffer side. Another really good for a balance between damage and debuffer role is actually Silver Roll Signature Lightcone, providing 24% effect hit rate, and when the wearer deals damage to an enemy that currently has 3 or more debuffs, wearer will gain a 12% increase in crit rate. And using basic attack or skill and ultimate, you have a 100% base chance to inflict 8th code on a random hit enemy that does not yet have it, and 8th code will make those enemies take 12% more damage for one turn. Effect hit rate is good as it's going to help you get further chances and higher effect hit rate stat to further land your debuffs. The 3 or more debuffs is something you'll always feel as she's able to practically inflict it all on her own. So 12% more crit rate there is going to allow you to get even less rolls. And at the very end, you're able to make enemies take 12% more damage, which once again will not only benefit her damage, but also your team's damage and amplify that debuffer side on the roll. So this amplifying the debuffer side, this making her easier to build with effect hit rate, and this helping your DPS side is why it's another good option. Now for 2 actual strict options you would use if you want to focus on her damage, one of them is going to be Acheron Signature Lightcone, providing 36% increase to crit damage, and when the wearer hits an enemy, they will be inflicted with Mirage Fizzle for 1 turn. Each time the wearer attacks, it can only be triggered once on each target. Wearer will deal 24% increased damage to targets with Mirage Fizzle and an additional 24% damage dealt by their ultimate. Everything here is going to further amplify the damage that Cipher does do. The crit damage is going to buff up any damage she does do as she crits. 24% overall damage to anyone with Mirage Fizzle, which is going to be very easy to have uptime on that, especially with someone like Cipher who's built fast. And her ultimate will also do additionally an increase of 24% damage. Again, just like some other stuff, focusing on the actual damage on the ultimate is going to be the initial hit and the other hits and not actually the recorded value or anything, which is her main source. It's going to mainly be the damage that your team does rather than her herself, but still getting some buffs on it is going to be nice, as the more buffs you have on it, the more the actual initial hit can do. So helping with that actual damage here is why it's good, and everything here makes it a fantastic option. And another good option is Good Night and Sleep Well, increasing the damage the wearer will deal by 12% for 3 stacks, also applies a dot for every debuff the enemy does have. And at S5, it is a 24% increase to damage dealt. Giving you up to a 72% damage increase is very good. And again, it's very easy to have 3 or higher debuffs on the teams you do run her on, so it's just a massive damage increase overall. And now 2, focusing more on just the debuffer side, one of them is going to be resolutions. Being able to hit an enemy and ensnare them if they're not already ensnared, 60% base chance for that, and you will actually decrease ensnared enemies' defense by 24%, by 12% for a turn. And at S5, it is a 60% base chance with a 16% defense shred. Just providing her some defense shred access, so again making her do more damage, technically the team doing more damage, mainly focusing on the fact that you now have an access to another debuff for defense shred. Overall, it's going to be a good option for her debuffer role. And another one you can use is before the tutorial mission starts, you need to run someone else that's going to be able to lower someone's defense, as their base kit does not actually allow for that. But if you do, this Lightcone will increase effect hit rate by 20% or 40% and will recover 4 energy or 8 energy when the wearer attacks defense reduced enemies. The effect hit rate being a big massive increase is going to be great to land her debuffs and practically guaranteeing all the ones she does have in her base kit. And with getting energy back, attacking defense reduced enemies, you're able to ult a lot more, which is why it's actually a really strong option if you are attacking defense reduced enemies. Now I will say the upcoming Battle Pass additions, so we're getting more Lightcones for the Battle Pass. The Nihility option on there is going to be really good for focusing more on the sub DPS side of Cipher. So if you don't have any of these or any of them available and you still do buy the Battle Pass, the upcoming one might be really good for you. Taking a look at the best Relic sets for Cipher. I cannot stress this enough. First, I'm going to be talking about the 4 pieces, but only do these 4 pieces if the set allows you to hit 170 or higher speed in battle. So you have enough rolls, and depending on your Lightcone and such, and overall you do have over 170 speed to make sure she gets full use of her actual bonus traits. If you can't do that with the 4-piece, I'm going to talk about 2-piece speed and such after the 4 pieces, but that will be the ones you do. Do not make the mistake of building her below 170 just to run a 4-piece, as missing out on the bunch of crit rate you can get and the big recorded damage increase and not getting the full effect is a big downgrade to her overall potential. So do not make that mistake. So assuming you are reaching the 170 or higher speed, the best set overall is going to be 4-piece Pioneer. 2-piece increases damage dealt to enemies with debuffs by 12%. 4-piece will increase crit rate by 4%, and the wearer will deal 8%/12% increased crit damage to enemies with at least 2/3 debuffs. After the wearer inflicts a debuff on enemy targets, aforementioned effects increases by 100% for 1 turn. Cipher existing on the field has everyone with a debuff, so it's practically free 12% damage to those enemies with that debuff, so it's just a free damage increase. 4-piece provides crit rate, which you still want to get some crit rate. She gives herself a bunch, but still getting some rolls will help you get less rolls you would need overall. And you can get a big increase to the actual crit damage dealt that Cipher can do, and she can inflict the debuff to get the aforementioned effects increase. She is able to apply debuffs, so you don't have to really worry about it, but if you have other people applying debuffs as well, you can get it a lot faster. And overall would be the best relic set for a 4-piece that you would do for her own damage. Another good 4-piece on her is actually 4-piece Genius. 2-piece increases quantum damage by 10%, and 4-piece will give 10% defense ignore when the wearer deals damage to an enemy target. And if that enemy does have quantum weakness, it will be an additional 12% defense ignore, giving you up to a 20% defense ignore. So the 2-piece will increase her overall damage as she does do quantum damage. 4-piece gives her 10% free defense ignore, which on its own is whatever, but if you can get that quantum weakness for 20%, it's going to be good. On its own, it's not going to be better than Pioneer, but if you have other sources of defense shred / defense ignore given on the team, so if they have quantum weakness and you have stuff and other debuffers maybe that have defense shred, you have Lightcones applying defense shred, you have someone on the team maybe providing some defense ignore to Cipher as well, then defense ignore does become stronger. The more defense ignore you have paired with more defense shred, the stronger those defense shred / defense ignore becomes. So on its own, it's a usable set, not the greatest, definitely going to be worse than Pioneer. But if you're able to stack up a good amount, then it can actually outperform. But in most cases, 4-piece Pioneer would be the one you do, but 4-piece Genius does work. Another option you can use is 4-piece the Wind Soaring set. 2-piece increases attack by 12%, and the 4-piece will increase the wearer's crit rate by 6%. After the wearer uses a follow-up attack, increases damage dealt by ultimate by 36% for 1 turn. 2-piece providing attack will increase her overall damage as she does scale off attack. 4-piece providing crit rate, once again as I mentioned with Pioneer, 4-piece is helpful. And this mainly will be the set if you do want to purely focus on the initial hit of her actual ultimate. It's not as strong as Genius set or running Pioneer, but it's still an option you can utilize as she does have a follow-up attack. The main damage she does do is not off her hit, but actually the recorded damage, but this can help you counteract that a little bit by increasing the actual hit that her ultimate does do. So if you have a really good Wind Soaring set that does give her really good stats and you have a perfect build with it, then you can opt to do it. Again, just be informed, it doesn't perform as good as Pioneer or Genius set. Past that, it would now be coming to doing 2-piece 2-pieces. The most common one is going to be 2-piece speed and 2-piece speed, just so you can get easier to the 170 requirement. If you only need one 2-piece speed and let's say you hit it and you just need something else, then you can do 2-piece speed with 2-piece of one of the quantum increasing sets, so Poet works and also Genius for the 10% quantum damage, or 2-piece of one of those and 2-piece of Pioneers, or 2-piece of one of those with 2-piece attack percent increasing sets, so the Hero set, Wind Soaring set, Dot set, and also Musketeers. Forgot to mention, the speed sets with the 2-piece speed increasing ones are Hackerspace, Relieved Ordeal, and also the Warrior Goddess set. Another 2-piece you can actually use is 2-piece of the Wave Strider set, as it does provide crit damage, so if you want more crit damage, that can help. But those would be the ones you want to do for 2-piece. So again, for 4 pieces, Pioneer going to be the best one overall. If not that, Genius does work. Weaker than those two would be Wind Soaring, but Wind Soaring does work. And then for 2-piece 2-pieces, you can do 2-piece speed, so Warrior Goddess with Ordeal or Hackerspace. One of those and 2-piece Pioneers, or 2-piece of one of those with the quantum increasing damage set, so Genius and Poet, or 2-piece of one of those and one of the actual attack increasing sets. For Planar Ornaments, the most consistent and best one you want to use overall is just going to be Glamoth, providing 12% attack increase to the wearer, and when the wearer's speed is greater than or equal to 135/160, wearer will gain a 12%/80% increase to damage. so a free 12% increase to attack. And a proper build Cipher is going to have 170 or higher speed, so by proxy you will have over 160 speed, getting the full 18% damage. So you are getting a 12% increase to your attack while also gaining a actual 18% increase to damage overall at the same time. This would be the best option overall if you want to increase Cipher's damage. Another one for her own personal damage would be Inner Salsado, which provides 8% crit rate when the wearer's crit rate reaches 50% or higher, which her trace already does. Damage dealt by the wearer's ultimate and follow-up attack increases by 15%, and she does have access to both of those, so ultimate, again, it's not going to increase the recorded damage or anything, but the actual hit will be increased, and same thing does apply to the follow-up attack, so it will actually be increasing both those sources of damage, while also providing you some nice crit rate. So another good sub-DPS option for her own personal damage would be this one. Now, if you don't want to do those, you could also just opt to slap one of the supportive sets. Let's say you're mainly just running her as a debuff bot to not deal too much personal damage. Then you can just go ahead and give her one of the supportive sets. So if you're pairing her with an attack scaler, which usually you will do, you can slap Lushaka, which also gives her 5% energy regen rate, and 12% attack to the character position first on the team lineup. So if that character does benefit from attack, which is usually the case, they will benefit from this. You can also run Broken Keel, which provides 10% crit damage to everyone and also gives the wearer 10% effect res. Just be sure to hit the 30% effect res needed for the 10% crit damage for your team. This also does benefit her, by the way, so technically it also does help her damage. If you're running her alongside another quantum DPS, you can also use Panaconi, which also provides 5% energy regenerate and will increase damage for all other allies that are the same type as the wearer by 10%. So just be sure to run her with someone else that is the same type, so Quantum. And then Aegis also does work with the 12% increase in the max HP, which will help with her survivability, not really anything for her damage. And once she has 120 speed or higher, which is no issue, everyone will gain 8% attack, which also does affect her, so slightly increasing her damage. Only do these, again, if you are running her as a lesser damage and more supportive / debuffer role, and you want to focus on her just not doing damage mainly, and are just purely focusing on getting as much turns as possible to keep debuff uptime and also increase the main damage for your DPS, so those ones would be the ones you would do. But if you want to focus on her damage, again, it would be Glammoth or Salsado, and if not, the supportive sets. For the main stats on the Relics, if you are focusing on her damage, then you will want to do crit damage, as she doesn't need a crit rate body, as that will give you too much usually. She already has a bunch of crit rate axes, so practically always will be running crit damage. And if you are doing something like running resolutions and you're running her purely as a fast debuffer and not really focusing on her damage, you could give her effect hit rate to guarantee all her debuffs and also help you get a higher amount needed for the actual resolutions Lightcone if you're using that. So if you're in that case, you can use effect hit rate instead. For the feat, you want to do speed. For the orb, you mainly always want to go with quantum damage, but you can use attack percent. The difference isn't super insane, just use whatever that has better rolls. If you have a lot of speeds on an attack orb, then you can just go ahead and use that. Quantum, again, usually will do best, but attack percent still works. And for the link group, you mainly would do attack percent, but you can use energy regen rate, as you do want to have her ultimate proc her actual stuff, which you can still do just fine with attack percent. But if you just happen to have a really good energy regen rate and you don't want to focus on her personal damage too much and you just want to focus on her proccing the actual team damage total with her ultimate, in that case you can use energy regen rate. For the substats, first you want to prioritize speed, get it to 170. That is going to be the bare minimum, as you want to get the full recorded damage increase and also the crit rate increase. Be sure to focus on that first, because not getting to 170 speed is going to be a major downgrade to her potential overall. Even if you're not looking for her to do too much damage and you're mainly focusing on the recorded value, you're losing a lot of recorded value damage you are getting out of that. So be sure to get her to 170 speed first. Past that, if you do want to focus on effect hit rate to guarantee more debuffs, let's say her signature Lightcone or her skill and such, then you can focus on getting some effect hit rate, get it as close to 39% as possible, as that will practically guarantee the ones for her skill and signature. And if you're running resolution Lightcone and you want to guarantee that, then getting it to 67%-ish will be your go-to. So if you want to guarantee the debuffs on her skill or her signature Lightcone, and so on, then getting it to those amounts would be your go-to. Past that is your generic crit damage, crit rate, and attack percent rolls. Aim to have at least 40 to 50% crit rate before going into battle, because if you have 40, that will translate to having 90% in battle. The closer you are to 50%, the closer you are to 100% in battle, and then get as much attack percent and crit damage as you physically can. So once again, first focus on speed, get it to 170 minimum. If you want to push that to 200, that's up to you. 200 will allow you to get more actual turns in a cycle, but that's up to you. 170 is the bare minimum you want to get for the full effect. Past that, if you do want to focus on effect hit rate for the debuffs of her signature, skill, resolution, so on, 39% to focus on the skill and also her signature Lightcone, and 67% if you are using the resolution Lightcone. So if you want to focus on landing those debuffs, that would be the one you'd focus for. Past that, crit damage, crit rate, and attack percent rolls, the generic DPS stuff. Now for the team building / team idea options for Cipher. I don't actually have Cipher on this account, so pretend Jiaoqiu here is actually Cipher herself. There are two best teams that Cipher is on, and one of them, which is going to be the most common one, is actually the Acheron team. So you'd have Cipher herself with Acheron as the main DPS, and then the other slots would change depending on if you're doing 2 Nihility and such, if you're running E2 Acheron, or if you're running E0 Acheron and still subbing out for a actual Harmony character. So a E0 double example would be, again, pretending this is Cipher, Acheron, and then you'd run someone like Jiaoqiu. Jiaoqiu would be the best other option to do, as he still is the best for her. And then your last slot would obviously be your sustain, so in most cases you would be using Aventurine if you do have him. But if you don't have Aventurine, you can still use someone like Hyacinth, or your other best sustain you do have, so you can still use Luocha. You can actually just go ahead and use Fulfo as well. He works as fine. You can use Linksha, you can also use Gallagher, just depending on what your best sustain is, but Aventurine is usually the main one to go on here. If you're running an E2 Acheron team, you usually would want to sub out one of these characters for a Harmony character. So in this case, you would sub out Jiaoqiu, assuming you want to run Cipher as the one for your E2 Acheron team. And so you'd sub out the Jiaoqiu slot for either an action advance given character like Sunday, or the best one with Acheron is actually Tribi, so Tribi would be the usual go-to. This also does function pretty well as an E0 team as well, not just E2. And then again, if you don't want to use Tribi and you want to use an action forward given character, hyperspeed, -1 speed. So for -1 speed or hyperspeed, you can use Sunday. For a hyperspeed, you can use someone like Sparkle, depending on what you want to do and your own personal goals. Those are options you can do. And now the next best team is actually the Feixiao team. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove everyone right here. So the main DPS for this would obviously be Feixiao. Pretending Jiaoqiu once again is Cipher. Cipher is a fantastic follow-up sub-DPS slot for Feixiao. Usually you have Feixiao, the sub-follow-up DPS character, and then usually the Harmony support is practically always going to be Robin in this case, as without Robin, Feixiao does lose a lot of damage. But whatever substitute for the Harmony support you do have there, so let's say you put Tribi on instead, you can do that. Usually Robin would always be the case to use there. And Robin also will be benefiting Cipher with her buffs as well, as Cipher does benefit a ton from Robin's buffs as well. And then last slot, once again, would be your sustain. So Aventurine, again, is going to be the best on this, but again, as I mentioned previously, just use whatever you have best or available. And so it would look something like this. Those are going to be the two best teams Cipher is on. You can also just replace someone like Feixiao and then run Ratio instead. Ratio can actually work on a team like this as well, that it does fine as well, as Cipher does have good debuffs. And then again, past that is going to mainly just be any DPS that would benefit a ton from Cipher's debuffs that can also manage the skill point usage. Doesn't have to be a debuff for DPS like Acheron or Dr. Ratio, or a strict follow-up character like Feixiao. You can run her alongside someone like a Noxa Hyper Carry as well, that does work. A lot of teams where you would try to run like a Jiaoqiu sub out for a best slot, let's say you just don't have that actual best slot for that character available. So you run Jiaoqiu as a debuffer, practically on the same cases of those teams. I can't even find Jiaoqiu anymore. Where did he go? There he is. Teams where you'd run him instead of another character, let's say you didn't have them or they were already being used, and so you'd put Jiaoqiu as a substitute. That's going to be the same case as Cipher. You can put her in those slots, as she is a debuffer / sub DPS. Good debuffs that can actually benefit a lot more characters than Jiaoqiu, because Jiaoqius are a bit more niche with ultimate vulnerability. And with Cipher's personal damage, she can fit in a lot more teams. So any team that can actually benefit from her debuffs and can manage the skill point spam that Cipher does want to do is a plausible option to use. And yep, that is the video. That is the full guide to Cipher. Once again, hope you guys found the video helpful. If you did, drop a like, would be greatly appreciated. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the touch of Star content and guides. And I'll see you later. Peace out.